Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Who's excited for lesson 2? Yeah. Oh, yes. That's the spirit. Okay. As we did last week, we are going to first begin our discussion with a short prayer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a prayer to God, asking that He should bless every one of our brave, heroic soldiers fighting for our people. Every one of the hostages today was, Baruch Hashem, a miracle, alive, healthy. And God willing, you see the video of all the family running to the hospital, running to see their brother, husband. So God willing, every single one of those hostages will come back, God willing, miraculously, very, very soon. That easy. 11 kids, yes. 2 wives, helps. I have 8 with 1 wife. Take that. Take that. Okay. So let's pray to God, and then, what? We can share. If you don't have cards, maybe we just give everyone. There's a few extra ones there. I know here. Mushka can also share. I know behind here. Thank you. Thank you. I have to thank my daughters for all their amazing technological help getting us started. Look at that. I know. I'm cringy. I know. So let us pray and let us get to work because we have a lot to talk about, my friends. Chapter 121. We'll say it slowly together. Shir, Lamalot, Esa, Einai, El, Harim, Me'ayin, Yavo, Ezri, Me'im, Adonai, Osei, Shemayim, Va'aretz, Al Yitain, Va'amot, Raglecha, Al Yanum, Shomrecha, Hine, Lo Yanum, Velo Yishan, Shomer, Yisrael, Adonai, Shomrecha, Adonai Tzilcha, Al Yad Yeminecha, Yomam Hashemesh Lo Yakeka, V'yareach Balayla, Adonai Yishmarcha Mikol Ra, Yishmar Es Nafshecha, Adonai Yishmar Seischa Uva'echa Me'ata V'ad Olam. Okay, thank you, and God share all of our prayers. Now for the joke. So, an American, a Frenchman, an Israeli are out on a cruise somewhere on a boat, and they get kidnapped by cannibals. They're tied up, and the chief cannibal, of course, are very kind people. So they tell these 3 victims that are about to come tomorrow night's dinner, say, you have one last request before we kill you. So the American says, before you kill me, I want to enjoy one last really good football game. Give me a big bucket of wings. Give me a whole case of beer. Give me a big, 75-inch screen TV. I want to watch whatever game, whatever TV follows. And after I watch my last game and have my last few beers, then you can kill me. They asked the Frenchman, what's your last request? So my last request is to have a really good meal with a very, very fine glass of French wine, some beautiful music playing in the background, some nice music, and enjoy a beautiful evening. And after that, then you can kill me. He asked the Israeli, what's your last request? He says, I want you to give me a good kick in the tachlis, a good kick in the rear end. Before you, don't just kill me. First kick me and beat me a little bit, and then you can kill me. Well, looking at him like he's crazy. Okay, no problem. So the guy goes, he gives him a big kick in the rear end. He goes flying over. And as he falls over, he pulls out of his boots, out of his shoes, a gun that he had hidden in his shoes, pulls out the gun, starts shooting like a real commando, kills all of the terrorists, all the cannibals, frees the American and the Frenchman, and they're free. They couldn't believe it, like, wow, you're a hero, you're amazing. But if you had a gun hidden in your shoe the whole time, why did you tell them to kick you first? We should have killed them a long time ago. So you saying I should have killed them before they kicked me and have the UN call me an aggressor? Yeah, is right. So I guess you all get how it's connected to what we're going to be talking about tonight, right? So last week, we'll do a quick review. Last week, we established 3 vital principles that are critical. Thank you. Can keep it. 3 vital principles that are critical for saving lives. And each one of these principles are critical. And as Jews that follow God and follow the Torah, number 1, when we know that someone is coming to kill us, we have a moral obligation to rise up to kill them first. We don't wait for them to come. We don't wait to be kicked in the rear end before we pull a gun out to defend ourselves. The moment we have the opportunity, we don't wait. We stand up first to defend ourselves. The second principle that we learned last week is we don't stop fighting until we win. No ceasefires halfway through, where the enemy gets to decide when we fight and when we stop. We fight ad ridita until the enemy has been obliterated and destroyed and they're no longer a threat to us. And the third important principle we discussed last week is what's considered important, what's considered strategic. Every inch of Israel is considered a border city. And when we're talking about a border town, there's no limits. We violate the Shabbos, etc., to do what we can to defend a defensive position. Okay. So now, my friends, despite everything we've said last week, what happens? Somehow the whole world still has a problem with it, right? And that's when we come to the problem that Israel is facing, what we call the Hasbara, the PR war, where people, the world, the nations, don't understand why it is that we're fighting with our neighbors, why are we attacking them, why are we killing them, etc., etc. So tonight, in order to understand how we can more effectively communicate to the world our position, we need to start at the very, very beginning. And the beginning is understanding what is our claim to the land of Israel. What are we even doing there? There's such a big universe out there. There's so many places in the world to live. And you have this tiny little piece of real estate in the middle of a desert, surrounded by enemies on all sides. The worst kind of neighbors you could possibly ask for. You have such neighbors, you would think, genug shoin, enough. What are we doing? What's our claim to the land of Israel? And I don't want to spend too long on this, but typically there are three primary explanations and arguments that are made to justify why Jewish people are living in the land of Israel. The first argument is a historical argument. And again, briefly, Jews have been living in Israel for 3,000 years, from Abraham, and we have King David, and we have Solomon, and we have all these archaeological proofs of all the kings that lived there and the temple. And there's never been a time in history where Jews have not lived in Israel, even when we were in exile, even when we were suffering. Jews did everything they could to have their connection to Israel. Historically, the land of Israel has always been ours. It is ours. And that's the number one argument very often used to justify why we are in Israel. In fact, Bibi spoke a few weeks ago in Congress. This was the argument that he made to explain why we're there. The second explanation that's commonly given to justify our existence is a legal argument. There was a Balfour Declaration, there was a UN partition plan, there was a vote, and it was decided that there should be an Arab Jewish state and the Palestinian Arab state, etc. And basically, we have every legal right to be there. We are a legally established country by all the laws of the international community, by the UN, etc., etc., etc. And so we have every right to defend ourselves, and we fight by the letter of the law, and we're very proud of the fact that everything we do is legally justified, and we wouldn't do anything that's illegal. So that's our second argument. Like any other country, we're entitled to be here. The third argument that's normally given is that we need a homeland in order to survive. We were, unfortunately, visitors, foreigners, strangers in many, many different lands. And somehow, wherever we went, our neighbors didn't like us too much. And from country to country, we were oppressed, we were annihilated, we were attacked, we went through so much suffering that finally, we need to have a land of our own where wherever in the world a Jew will be, that they'll be attacked, that there'll be anti-Semitism, that there'll be threats, they'll have a place that they can call home, where they can go to be. We'll have an army. They'll be able to defend us, to protect us, etc. Right? These are the three classic arguments that are normally used to justify our existence in the land of Israel. And yet, despite this, many people still don't fully understand what it is that we're doing in Israel. They don't understand. Someone that's watching the class, so he told me that a friend of his, wasn't the anti-Semite, wasn't someone that was trying to, a friend, they were having lunch together, and this non-Jewish friend asks him, like, I don't understand what's going on in Israel. Why don't you all just go back to Europe? And but he wasn't saying in a negative way, like confused. Why don't you all just go back to Europe and like just stop fighting with the Arabs? I understand self-defense, like I understand you need to defend yourself. You were attacked on October 7th, but like, so go somewhere else. Like, why do you need to fight with them? And this was a well-meaning question that was coming from a place of innocence. And then she felt very bad. She apologized. She realized, but The question in many people's minds, I'm not talking about the anti-Semites that want us to be killed. A typical uneducated American that's barely knows what's going on in the Middle East, and all they know is that there's never-ending conflict, quote unquote. These are the words: never-ending conflict, never-ending issues. And think about it like you have your little kids at home, and they're fighting over whatever it is. And sometimes it's not about who's right, who's wrong, who had the toy first, who had it second. Just stop fighting. I'll take it away from both of you. It doesn't make a difference who had it first, right? And so many people don't understand, why are we still fighting for this land when there's so many other nations all around us that are obviously we're doing something wrong. We're getting on their bad side. We must be doing something wrong, and they don't understand what it is that we're still doing in Israel. The fact that we have history, they're okay. A lot of nations have history in a lot of places, and then the world moves on. The fact that we're relying on the international community to justify our existence, and what if tomorrow they come out, the International Court of Justice, and all their brilliance comes out and says that we're illegally occupying land? We can't stake our entire claim to Israel on an international community, on the fact that the UN once upon a time said we could be there. They could change their mind tomorrow. They are changing their mind. That's not why we're there, even though it's true that legally we're allowed to be there. And yes, it's true that we've been oppressed in every single homeland, in every single land we've been in. But our existence is Israel. Just because we've been oppressed elsewhere and we suffered a Holocaust, does that alone justify us, quote unquote, doing a genocide in Gaza? Not necessarily, again, to the uneducated person. The ultimate reason why we're in the land of Israel is not because of our history, although it's true. Not because the UN said we can have it, although that's true. Not because we are entitled to a homeland and to an army to defend ourselves, although that's true. The ultimate reason why we're in the land of Israel is because God gave it to us. Exactly. And the Torah is full of different statements from the very beginning of Jewish history, where God makes it absolutely and abundantly clear that this land is a land that God says in Genesis chapter 15, that he formed a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your descendants, I have given this land from the river of the Egypt to the great Euphrates River. This is clear. God says it's going to be your land. And 2 chapters later, God says, not only will it be your land, but the land you sojourn in, all the land of Canaan, I assign to you and your offspring to come as an everlasting inheritance. So this land of Israel is a land that God promises to Abraham for all future generations as an everlasting inheritance, will be our land forever. And this is the ultimate reason why we're in Israel. Not because of history there, and not because we have a legal argument to be there. We're there because the land is ours. We're there because thousands of years ago, the creator of the heavens and the earth bequeathed it to us as an eternal inheritance for us to have forever. And that's why we can't just go back to Europe, assuming that Europe was a nice place to be, and we had, assuming you're a real uneducated ignoramus and you don't know that in Europe we've lost millions and millions and millions of people over the course of the last few centuries. Assuming you don't know that, France is a pretty dangerous place for Jews to be right now. Assuming that it was a beautiful place and all they did was drink French wine, we still couldn't go. We can't go to Miami either, because Israel is our homeland. So what might you argue? What might you say now? Rabbi, you're right. We all agree. Well, you're preaching to the choir. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. For me, as a rabbi, to say that Israel is our land because God gave it to us, beautiful, very nice. I agree with you. But that's not going to convince the world that we belong in Israel, right? That's the question. The world is having a very difficult time coming to terms with the fact that we've staked out our territory in this Arab neighborhood, and they don't care about the fact that we claim that God gave it to us, right? That's the challenge that many of you feel we have, is in being able to explain to the world the truth of this idea that God is the one that gave it to us. So I have good news for you, my friends. First of all, everyone agree? Anyone have that same feeling, that same challenge? Yes. It's a real challenge. We all agree God gave us the land, but how is that going to be a convincing argument to make the world, who's accusing us of being colonizers and occupiers and apartheid and genocide and whatever, how will this answer them? So I have good news for you, my friends. You know what the good news is? These accusations that we would be considered thieves and occupiers and colonizers was foretold a long, long time ago. Long before we were ever occupiers, quote unquote, occupiers. Long before we ever had a UN partition plan. Long before we ever had an Israeli army. Already we were told that we should expect the international community to complain about us and to accuse us of being thieves. Where do we see this? In the very beginning. In the very, very beginning. How does the Torah start? The very opening of the entire Torah, the entire Bible begins with the verse, in the beginning, God created heavens and earth. Right? You're all familiar with that verse, right? Now, so Rashi, you heard of Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, who was an 11th century sage, and he asks it's not his question, it's really a question that's brought in the Medrash from Rabbi Yitzchak, who was 700 years before him. And the question that he asks is a very simple question. What is the Torah? The Torah is a storybook? Is it a history book? You read my email last week, you should know the answer to that question. So the Torah is not a history book. It's true the Torah tells us history. The function of the Torah is to teach us how to do the mitzvot. God gave us 613 commandments in the Torah, and the ultimate objective, the ultimate purpose of the Torah is to teach us how to live and how to do the word of God. So if the Torah be a history book, it will make sense that the history book is beginning with a story of creation. But the Torah is not a storybook. The Torah is a book of laws, a book of mitzvot, a book of instruction. The word Torah is from the word hora, to instruct. Mora is a teacher, same word. So the Torah is to be a mora, to be a teacher to us how to live life. So the question is asked in the very, very opening of the very first Rashi, the very first commentary of the entire Torah, is this question. Why is the Torah beginning with a story and not with the first mitzvah that we were commanded as a nation when we were in Egypt? And Moses comes with the command of God to count the new month of Rosh Chodesh and to prepare for the Pesach offering of our Exodus. Why did we not start with that? Good question. You ready for the answer? So Rashi tells us, again, Rashi was written 1,000 years ago from a sage who lived 700 years before him. And he writes as follows, that if the this is a quote from the Rashi, if the nations of the world will say to it, you are thieves for having conquered the land of the seven nations, Israel will reply, the entire world is God's. He created it and granted it to whomever he desired. It was his will to give it to the seven nations, and it was his will to take it from them and to give it to us. You understand? This is amazing. It's as if Rashi, again, a Talmudic sage lived 1,000 years ago, quoting a rabbi who lived 700 years before him, was sitting here in America in 2024, reading BBC and CNN and the New York Times, and he's watching the UN resolutions coming one after the other, and he's scrolling through the social media feeds of all the haters of Israel, and Rashi is telling us already then that God foresaw that, and not only foresaw, he knew that no matter what will happen, there will be times when the world will accuse us of being thieves and colonizers and occupiers, etc., etc. And therefore, God structured the entire Torah in a way that we should know. Don't be intimidated by the arguments of the world. Don't allow their argument to have any sway over you. You should be able to answer them with clarity and conviction. Who made the world? And most people accept that God made the world. All the nations accept that there's a creator to the heavens and the earth. That God that created the heavens, that God who created the earth, he gave the land to the land of Canaan, and he's the one that took it from them and gave it to us. You think, how can you say that? It's not going to work. We got to try and use arguments that are more convincing. My friends, we've used every other argument besides this argument. And is it working? No, it's not working. You know why? Because the only argument that we're afraid to say is the argument that God says will work. God says, here's the argument to respond to them. God changes the structure of the whole Torah to give us the winning argument that will be able to shut the nations up when they accuse us of being thieves and occupiers, And instead, we're afraid to use that argument. So we think of every other argument, historical arguments and legal arguments and Jewish survival arguments. And the one argument that God said, this is the argument that you should use, is the one argument that we're afraid to try. We'll see how the Rebbe says this with such clarity. Try and see if we're able to be effective.
Aber soll wissen sein, Psag din beteile. Aber sagt onlich hat viele, als es sein, als in Zeit. Und nicht mit sagen, Golui. Aber wir will etwas zunehmen, wir will etwas tun an alle. Sie teilen seine verkehrt, mit rechtfertigen Menschen. Wir sind an Noschem Tzadikim, jagt sich nach Scholem. Man will darf gescholem. Aber wie bald man darf scholem, darf sich sein verbunden auf Niton an Avli des Zweiten, hat doch ein Gasloni Maten. Wo das sieht man bepasst es. Darf sehen, als soll sich nicht stellen gegen den Rotzen Abele, was bir Zähne in Nosno Lohem und bir Zähne in Notla Mehev in Noslo, Libnei Sol am Gedesche in der Neven von Achla Seele. Und wenn ist mir nichts mehr schlicht mit dem Menschen, wenn Menschen dann nicht. Am hebt zu reden mit anderen Unionen. Okay, du mit Duber kam Pomi. Am setzt sich Adover Nifla, alle Teile Schönes und Schönes, was man gekontent und was nicht in Gänze. Das ist der einzige Teil, was bis sich sich zu sagen.
Okay, beautiful. Rebbe is saying clearly, you should know that from not 1948, not 1967 or whatever. Thank you, Simi. But from the beginning of time, God deliberately structured the Torah in a way that we should know that the answer to the nations that are already foretold in advance will accuse us of being occupiers and colonizers. The answer is God is the one that made the world. God is the one that gave it to us. Now, that's the ultimate answer. And sometimes the most effective answers are the truest answers. Yes, Neil. So even if you're going to ask, Neil is asking the question, but what about a million Muslims that won't listen to that? So first of all, Israel's not trying to convince the Muslims. They're trying to convince the UN. But let's even say the Muslims. The truth is that Neil is right. Not everyone will listen because not everyone is looking for an answer for justification. Many of our enemies want to hate us and destroy us no matter what. They just say you're thieves and occupiers because it sounds good. It's very good language. So the next point is, as the Rebbe himself writes to President Zalman Shazar, who was the president of Israel from 1963 to 73, and he writes to him that I'm not under the delusion that arguments based on the principles of justice and integrity will prevail in the United Nations and the Vatican, etc. But you know what's most important? The morale of the youth, including within the IDF and the students in the United States and elsewhere. Even if our arguments will still fall on deaf ears, even if Muslims will still want to hate us and try and fight us, but we as Jewish people, our kids, our soldiers in the IDF have to be able to have the strength and the conviction and the confidence that comes from knowing that why am I fighting for this land? Because it's because God gave us this land. First of all, it will be effective. But even where it won't be effective, it's not the magic solution to solve all of the world's problems. Even where it won't be effective, even when people will refuse to listen, us being able to tell ourselves and to tell our kids that the reason why we're fighting for this land is because it's the land that God gave us. That gives us so much more confidence in the fight than if we're just fighting for a piece of land that historically happens to have sentimental value to the Jewish people. We're not just fighting for a land that the UN gave us. We're fighting for a land that God gave us. That gives a whole new sense of conviction, a whole boost to the morale of the Jewish soldiers and the Jewish kids and the American kids on campus. The American kids that the Rebbe is talking about. To be able to defend the land that's our land because God gave it to us. Is that clear? So now, that's fine. Okay. So now, my friend, I think we made that point already clear. The problem is, it's still, as Neil is saying, there's still going to be world pressure against us. The reality is, even if we use this argument will be effective with those of our friends or our associates, our neighbors, the people that are innocent and don't know. So like this person told me, he's watching the class, that when his friend, somebody he's in business with, asked him innocently, well, just go back to Europe. Like, why are you fighting with your neighbors? The same way I would tell my two kids that are fighting over a toy. I wouldn't even want to understand who started, who did first. We have to be able to tell them, God gave it to us. Why? We can't go back to Europe. God didn't give us Europe. God gave us Israel. That is the ultimate answer we need to be able to say, and not to be afraid of what anyone else will think about us, but to have such clarity and conviction in that truth. What about the United Nations? What about when the world condemns us? When there's another beautiful resolution condemning Israel for apartheid or whatever other garbage they spew, what do we do then? So what do we need to remember? We need to remember the land is ours. And when you have pressure from the UN, right? You have pressure. They're screaming at us. And you have God. What's going to win? Hopefully God's going to win. You're not under pressure anymore. When are you under pressure to answer the phone? So you'll see you're sitting at home. Let's do an example. Let's say if you don't use your phone on Shabbat. So you're sitting at, I'll tell for myself, I'll give you a personal example. Sitting at the dinner table. My wife, my kids are going to listen to this. I maybe shouldn't have chosen this example. So you're sitting at the dinner table, and my wife, rightfully so, doesn't want me to look at my phone and use my phone. We're at the dinner table. And then the phone rings. I get a message from someone, not to the side. Dinner, should I answer? Family, the person calling, can I call it back? Right? So I have to start. But imagine it was Shabbos and the phone rang. It wouldn't even enter my mind to answer the phone. It wouldn't even be something that would be something it wouldn't be a struggle. I wouldn't face any internal dilemma if my phone rang on Shabbos, because the phone and God is not a struggle for me. Don't listen, but my phone and my wife, it's a little, it's a little harder. You understand? So if my rights to Israel is because the UN gave it to me in 1948, and now the UN says you're violating international law by defending your borders, it's a little bit of a struggle. Are we right? Are we not right? There are Jews that are legitimately struggling with self-identity because their whole identity was taught to them by teachers, by rabbis, by leaders that told them, you exist in Israel because of the history. So history versus, human rights, that's already a struggle. But if we could say with conviction, it's God. God versus the UN, that's not a struggle. I don't have any doubt in myself. I don't have a hard time going to sleep knowing that I chose God over the UN. You understand? That's why there's Jews that are struggling, because we're not teaching our children with enough clarity that the reason why we are in Israel is because God gave it to us. The moment we start making all of these other arguments that sound very good and sound very logical, and they are logical, and they're true arguments, but do those arguments have counter arguments? Yes. And now you start, they're in college and they start hearing this and the professor starts saying that. And next thing you know, the professor's making a good point, and now they're in a struggle. Now they're in a state of real challenge, trying to figure out where they belong. That is why we need to be so clear on the fact that Israel is ours, because God gave it to us and for no other reason. That's number one. In addition, you know what happens when we do, God forbid, give into the pressure of the United Nations or of the world opinion or of the international community, etc.? You know what happens? There's something called the physics of pressure. You know how pressure works? Any scientists here in the room and engineers? We don't have to be so smart to figure this one out. Pressure works that the more force that you're able to successfully apply on something, the greater the pressure, right? That's not that complicated. The more you can put force, the more pressure there will be. And so the moment that you allow yourself to be pressured, and the moment you start to make concessions, and the moment you start giving in to the pressure of the world, you know what happens? The pressure only gets stronger. And then when you give into a little bit more pressure, doesn't ease off. The moment you give into more pressure gets stronger. You're going underwater, right? The more deeper you go, the stronger the pressure is. And the more we allow ourselves to concede and to give in a little bit, to give a little bit of the pressure, we don't now get a little bit of breathing space. It's a rule of physics. Just like gravity means something will fall, every single time we give in, every single time we make concessions, the pressure on our nation only gets worse and worse and worse. So it's very dangerous to think, I'll compromise just a little bit, and we'll say something is up for conversation, for discussion, and then it's not really. The moment you allow it to be a conversation, I'm going to say this again later tonight as well, the moment it becomes a conversation, you've already just increased the pressure upon yourself. Only when we're clear that something is not negotiable are we able to release and get rid of some of the pressure that's upon us. Let's watch this next video.
Weiß jeder Mensch, was kennt, a Tewe von einem Menschen, aber schaß der Tewe, der Nitwa, wird schwacher, wird der Tewe starker. Und wir will haben nach Shiva, Tfisa, Smoke, und wir will haben es aus der Rechnen, bei Israel, nicht Eretz Israel, darf Eretz Israel sein stark, in der Starkheit, mit welcher sie verstehen und rechnen. So mit sehen. Beschaß mal Tag gegeben, die Nacht, hat ihn bewiesen, die größte Schwachkeit, durch Abnehmen dem Zoi, Bitochen, Achi Chashuvim und Achi Ikrim, auch geben dort den Zatsche Knegel, wo das hat gleich bewiesen, mit wem er handelt. Und wir kommen bei Simonen als Mehrer und Mehrer, und man hat es auch sehr getan, weil derich sehen alle Viturim, was man gemacht noch drauf. Ist nicht der Pirush, aber das nennt gemacht dem Scholim, jeder Vitur hat gemacht schwacher, dem Zad, was hat mit Water gewählt.
Okay, it's very clear. Got it? Any questions before we go further? No.
When that happened in Sinai, how many other times after that did we give up land? Because that's just a land.
That's exactly what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Sinai in a minute. Okay, so this is regarding the world putting pressure. Everything we said till now is pressure from those that we don't feel a close alliance with, and those that we don't rely on for our security needs. So when the United Nations puts pressure on Israel, or when, I don't know, Qatar puts pressure on Israel, so it becomes more about our convoluted moral compass, that we need to make compromises for peace. So then it's like our security needs versus trying to be a beautiful citizen of the universe, right? But when America starts putting pressure, now we have another issue. What's the problem? Well, we're supposed to be friends, but more than just friends. We're not really friends. We're like friends with benefits, like we're friends with a lot of strings attached, all kinds of strings. What? We're frenemies. The truth is, I don't want to minimize what America does for Israel. It's very important to be appreciative. They do give us billions of dollars in weapons. They give us vital loan guarantees that allow us to borrow money at better rates. America does truthfully help does help Israel in many ways. And as Jews, we need to be thankful and be grateful. And it's important to be able to acknowledge every administration, the last number of administrations, that has helped Israel in many, many ways. The question, though, is what's the cost? What's the flip side to the benefit? So just because someone did you a favor, you have to say thank you. But sometimes you have to also analyze, is it worth it? Right? Sometimes a favor costs you more than what it costs you. Just hire someone to do it, Trust me, I'm aware of this. So sometimes we need to ask ourselves, yes, America is helping us. And yes, we're grateful and thankful that America, the superpower of the world, is protecting the Jewish nation of the world. I mean, that's from God too, by the way, that God gave America to be the super nation of the superpower of the universe, and they're helping us. But the question we need to ask ourselves is it worth it? These security guarantees, quote unquote, that America is giving us, their offerings of weapons and money and loans and vetoing UN security resolutions, etc., which all help us. What's the cost? What are the strings attached? And we need to ask ourselves, is it worth it? And what do you do when you find yourself in a very, very difficult choices? And very often the Israeli government is forced into making difficult choices. So a few points that I want to share with you. Everything I'm going to say now is not my own ideas, are all from the Rebbe, who addressed this many times from many different angles. And we're going to go through a few of the angles of understanding the dynamics and the intricacies and the complexities of the American-Israeli relationship, which is obviously very important to Israel, but obviously also perhaps very dangerous for Israel. So let's start with point number one. Point number one is that the president of the United States, no matter who he is not elected, or she is, or whatever. I heard that. Whoever it will be, or is, we're talking now, not in the future. The ultimate job of any president in the United States is not to protect Israel. They are elected, hopefully, to protect America. That's their job. Their number one job is to protect the United States. And there's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's why they were elected as president of America. And we have to remember that. And that's true with the president and with Congress and with the State Department. And so any Jew of any political party or of anywhere that assumes that America has Israel's truest, best interests at heart is sadly being a little bit naive. Sadly. America's ultimate interest is America. And that's fine. I have no complaints to them. That's what they should do. The only people in the world that have their ultimate job is to defend and to care about Israel is Israel's government. So Israel shouldn't care about what America needs, because America doesn't really care about what we need. Which is, by the way, parenthetically, why the Rebbe felt very strongly that Israel should diversify its sources of weapons, its sources of energy. There was once the Rebbe was very upset when Israel canceled the whole Aviv fighter jets and they started relying on American jets instead. The Rebbe wanted that we should sell them jets, we shouldn't be relying on them. There was once an opportunity to get gas from Norway, an exclusive contract with Norway. America pushed against it, they didn't do it. The Rebbe pushed that they should take the contract with Norway. The Rebbe wanted Israel to talk to the Soviet Union, talk to Russia. Because the more we're diversified, the less we're dependent upon any other one nation. But that's not really the point. The point is, the moment you understand this truth, that America's only real interest is America, and that's all that they really care about, you'll understand something which is a little uncomfortable to say, but it's true, that America does not honor its foreign policy guarantees. We've seen that in Israel, and you see it in the other countries. Most famously, in Israel, the most famous example was in 1956. In 1956, Israel finally withdrew from the Sinai Desert, right? We were there to protect the Suez Canal, the Straits of Tiran. There was a whole discussion. The world was putting pressure. So finally, Israel withdrew from the Sinai Desert, and the United Nations brought in emergency forces to come and patrol, etc., and all that. I'm sure many of you know the history in great detail. I'm going to go through it very, very quickly. On February 20th of 1957, in a public address, not privately, a public address, President Eisenhower was then the president. He said clearly that we expressed the conviction the Gulf constitutes international waters. No nation has the right to prevent free and innocent passages in the Gulf. The United States is prepared to exercise this right itself and to join with others to secure general recognition of this right. So the president went on public record saying he's ready to fight to defend Israel's ability to go into the waters, etc. What happened not even 10 years later? May 19th, 1967, Egypt expels these peacekeepers, and the UN general, whatever his name was, without saying boo, literally didn't even call a meeting. He just took his guys and they left. And a few days later, they closed the Straits of Tiran. And right away on May 25th, Abba Eban, the foreign minister of Israel, went to Washington to try and remind America, America, remember what you said 10 years ago? You promised you would fight for us. You promised that you would defend us if this would happen, because we knew this would happen. And what did America do in 1967? Absolutely nothing. President Johnson warned the foreign minister Eban that if you're going to not to do anything, if you do anything, we will not stand by your side. They tried to pretend that Egypt won't do anything. They're just bluffing. Don't worry about it. he officially going to make a flotilla of different ships to go through the Straits of Tiran. No other countries joined. It never happened. And America didn't do anything about the fact that Egypt had called their bluff. Now, I want to just point out that this is not only a Baruch Hashem in that story. We didn't listen. 1967, we did listen to Johnson, and we preemptively attacked in the 6-Day War, discussed at great length last week. And it seems the Israeli government is listening in, Baruch Hashem. They have spies not only in Gaza, they have listening devices here too. And they did it. And it worked beautiful, and nothing happened. That's the best part. Nothing happened. Lebanon threw some random rockets that happened to be not get hit. This happened so many other times. In 1980, America had a treaty with Taiwan. Defend Taiwan from China. And then all of a sudden, January 1st, 1980, America comes out and formally terminates its mutual defense treaty with Taiwan and recognizes full trade with China. Yeah, very good. 10 years ago, it was in the interest of America to try and fight China and to defend Taiwan. And the moment things changed, and the moment it became more expedient for America to have an ally, an alliance with China, sorry, Taiwan, this peace treaty we had is now officially terminated. I'll tell you a better example. In 1994, there was the Budapest Memorandum. You know what happened then? Yeah, Ukraine. Yeah, Nessa knows. And so Ukraine that had the third most nuclear war weapons in this territory, agreed to remove all of its nuclear warfare, all of its nuclear weapons, in exchange for what? Russia's agreement to never threaten its territorial integrity, and America signed on to the agreement as a guarantor that Russia would never invade Ukraine and that they would respect the territorial integrity of Ukraine because of giving away the nuclear weapons. And I think you'll know what happened next, right? If you read the news the last 3 years, you're kind of aware how that worked out for Ukraine, signing this agreement on the promise and guarantee of America defending it from Russian aggression. And we understand why. Again, I'm not blaming America. If I was the president of America, I wouldn't want to send soldiers into Ukraine and put American lives at danger and put them into harm's way and have your poll numbers here tanked because people are dying over there. Happened to Vietnam, it's happened to before. And as an American president, would be very wary to get mixed up in another war that's not your war. So I understand why America's only getting involved. That's what happened in 67. 67, we were fighting in Vietnam. We were involved in wars that weren't our business to be fighting in. So the last thing America wants to do is send soldiers now into the Sinai Desert. So that's fine. America's entitled to that. We just need to remember that when we rely on their guarantees to give away our hard-earned military successes because of their empty promises. That's all. Next, more importantly, when Israel will be strong, and when Israel will tell America negotiations, sorry, but we're not doing that, it's not even up for discussion. I know you're pushing me to agree to this ceasefire. I know you're pushing me to agree to this withdrawal and allowing the United Nations to have peacekeepers or whatever. And we say to America, thank you, but no thank you. Not only do we not sacrifice our relationship with America, we actually make it much stronger. We make I'll repeat that. By not listening to America, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, but listen, I'll explain it. By not listening to America, and by staying very, very strong in the things that are most important to our own security and our own ability to defend ourselves, not only do we not threaten and weaken our strategic alliance with America, but we actually make it much, much stronger. Why? Because what does America need in the Middle East? A little tatala. You know the tatala? A little kid dog with his tail between his legs that, goes meow when you look. The Middle East is a scary place. America's looking for a strong partner. That's what they're looking for. That's what they need. And if all America's going to get from Israel, we're going to wait to be patted on the head, say, good boy, right? And here's a bone for you. And they throw us a bone. And we come back with a bone in our mouth and we wait to be patted again and say, good boy, good boy. They don't need that. They don't need a needy partner in the Middle East. They want someone strong. Who do you make an alliance with? With a Nebuch case? Or with someone that's going to fight? That's who you make an alliance with. I'll prove it to you. When did the strategic alliance with America and Israel begin? When did America suddenly become the best friend of Israel? Anyone know? After 1967. Until 1967, America would not sell us weapons. America would not support us. America didn't do anything for us. We were using French planes. The first shipment of American weapons into Israel came in 1972. In 1967, America said, don't preemptively attack. President Johnson threatened that America would not be there for Israel if we attacked. And you know what we did? Yeah. We didn't listen. We attacked and we won without them. All of a sudden, they wanted to be our friend. Brilliant. Never would have thought of that, right? They wanted to be our friend because they saw that we were for real. And you know what happened after that? Here's the sad part. When we didn't listen to America and we won decisively, they came running to be our friends. But since that alliance has begun, since America has become the protector of Israel, has there ever been another war that we have decisively won since? No. We've survived some wars. We've ceasefired a lot more wars. And we have never, ever again won a decisive battlefield victory since relying on America to be our protector. This means that there's something deeply, deeply wrong with this relationship. We're not in a healthy relationship if we're not able to defend ourselves since 1967, since 1972, when America started sending us weapons. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. Okay. What's the next thing? So far clear, yes? This is point number one, to remember that what America is looking for is a strong partner. That's what they respect. That's what got us into the relationship to begin with, was our being strong and not being afraid to fight for ourselves. And that's what they're looking for. That's what the world respects. And that's what makes them want to be friends with us. The second thing we need to remember is that when the United States comes to us and says, make concessions for peace, call a ceasefire for humanitarian aid, for humanitarian reasons. You know why they're telling that to us? Not because they think that it's best for us. Not because anyone in Washington thinks that Israel will be better off in making a ceasefire. But America wants to be the peacemaker of the universe, right? We're the superpower. We want to be the policeman of the world. We want to show that we have diplomatic clout and that we have importance. So we got to be involved in everybody else's business. Again, that's America's decision to make. But we have to remember that if America wants to be seen as the peacemaker, what is America going to do to get peace? Going to look for the best solution or look for the easiest way out? They're going to look for the easiest way out and to apply pressure at the weakest link of the problem. And sadly, what's usually the weakest link of the conversation when it comes to the Middle East? Israel. The Arabs have no embarrassment and no shame saying, we're fighting a jihad, we're fighting to destroy our enemy, we're never going to stop till we destroy them. They say it publicly, they don't hide it. You don't need to go deep digging in the dark internet to find it. They're very proud of it. They're very proud. This is their ideology. This is what they live for. This is what they die for. And they say it clear. So America can't really convince them to make peace. How do you convince a jihadist to make a concession for peace? Doesn't really work. There's no. I think Golda Meir said something brilliant. Golda Meir said a lot of smart things. Golda Meir said that they want us to die. We want to live. Between dying and living, there's no concessions. You know what I'm saying? Pretty black and white. There's death, there's life. There's not much in between. Half alive, half your body, just no arms and no legs. Just, that's not a concession. So what happens? America puts pressure at the weakest link. And because we have these very, very convoluted morals and values where we somehow convince ourselves that we need to show the world that we really love all of humanity and we really want peace and we really don't want to hurt anybody and we really want to sing Kumbaya together. So therefore, Kumbayas are very important. Therefore, we become the weakest link of the discussion and we end up making concessions for empty guarantees from a nation that won't do anything for us when the push comes to shove, against the people that won't concede anything because they're committed to jihad till the end. It's by the way, if you see what's happening now, I don't get into what's happening now. Israel's going to negotiate against themselves. Who's in the negotiation now for a ceasefire? A whole bunch of nations all want to be the peacemakers. We have three nations, America and Qatar, and everyone's coming to be the heroes. And Egypt is there, the only people negotiating. A whole room of people. And of course, how can Israel go into that room and not get beaten up? They can't. You go in, there's not even two people to negotiate. You're the only person to negotiate with. Of course, you're going to get pressure. So we get pressure. We're asking for it. What's worse is not just that we are the weakest link and therefore America automatically is going to put pressure on us because we're the easiest way of them looking like they're the world heroes and making sure things are quiet so that the next election is good, because when there's wars and the price of gas is up and everything is, people don't vote for you when you're in office and there's a war. So you want to make a peace agreement and a ceasefire, of course. And America, so they put pressure on the weakest place. What else happens? They tell us, let's just talk about it. Let's just talk about it. There's no danger in having a conversation. That's what they tell us. And what we don't realize is once we even have a conversation, you know what happens? It sends a message that everything is negotiable. The moment you say, we can talk about it, you already said, my red line is not so red. I have a red line, but it's a pencil red line. It's not a marker red line. For enough money, for enough pressure, I'll move the red line a little bit. So what happened, by the way, in 1991, there was a Madrid conference. And Yitzchak Shamir was then the prime minister, who was a right-wing, considered very right-wing in the hawk. And he wasn't going to negotiate about Palestinian autonomy. At that time, the American government threatened that if they didn't participate in the process, they would deny $11 billion in loan guarantees. If you didn't come to the table, just come to Madrid, sit down, we'll have a conversation. You don't have to agree to anything. But if you're not willing to be a peace partner, we're not going to give you $11 billion in loan guarantees. So Yitzchak Shamir gave into the pressure to be a partner in peace, to be open to conversations. And once you start the conversation, it's too late. Too late. We can't even have the conversation. We have to understand that the red lines, there's certain red lines you don't talk about. Someone comes to me and says, you have 8 kids. Okay, let me take one of your kids. You can listen to this part, kid. Right? There's no negotiations. The cell phone at dinner or whatever. Take one of my kids. There's no conversation. There's nothing to talk about. Talk about this. There's no conversation. There's nothing for you to talk to me about. There's no chance in the world that I would ever give you one of my kids. The moment that Israel says, I'll sit down at the table to talk about giving away land that God gave us, your red line is no longer red. Make sense? Let's watch another beautiful video.
In the United States, that
No. Let me just give you an introduction to who this guy is. So this guy that you're seeing right now, his name is Eliakim Rubinstein. He was a veteran diplomat and a legal expert. He was a member of Israel's delegation to the peace talks with Egypt that led to the Camp David Accords. In the 80s, he was a legal advisor for the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was the Israeli cabinet secretary in Washington. And in 1991, which is when this video is, he was the chairman of the Madrid Peace Conference discussion I just mentioned a minute ago with Yitzchak Shamir. That's who the Rebbe is talking to.
In the United States, that beweisen man das starke behadeyot und behalten war sie noch gerne niederfallen von zur Woche, das war was anderes könnte es nicht sein. Kommen nicht Mann, da ist es so, als die Sultan Nazar oder sie hilft von sehr Chai und sehr tief.
זה מה שהוא גם יעשה, מפני שזמנים לא קלים, התקופה לא קלה עכשיו, וצריך באמת הרבה...
אבל הפיסלון והמגה, הדין זה, הוא ההיפך ממה שעשו הדאטו, והדאטו אוחזו בהקו שצורך לוותר בלי משהו על עניינים שבעים, ובשביל זה יקבלו משהו, וזה ההפך של הטבע של ארצות הברית. ארצות הברית נסקיימה על ידי זה שעומדו חזר, שמשהו חיוני בשבילו, אי אפשר בזה לוותר. אין מפנימים אפילו כשאנגליה התייבדה נגדם, וצרפת נגדם, כפי שואל כל העולם, היו אז נגד ארצות הברית. ובשביל שאוחזו בקו זה, בזה הצליחו, ומצליחים עד היום הזה.
אנחנו אומרים להם שמה שבשבילם עניינים של מדיניות חוץ, בשבילנו זה עניינים של קיום. זה הבדל גדול, רק לא תמיד קל להסביר להם את זה. זאת אומרת, מפני שיש לחץ ערבי, ויש עכשיו הרבה מאוד לחץ יותר מה שהיה בזמן האחרון.
באים לי בין שהמציאות, לדעתי, איננה כזו, כי המתחילים בדיבור, שזה העיקר בשבילנו, אבל כיוון שנמצאים אנשים 70 אומץ, לכן מוכרחים לוותר, וכיוון שהמתחילים לוותר, אי אפשר למצוא הנקודה ששם אי אפשר לוותר.
Understand? It's so simple. I mean, it's hard when you're in it, but it's so simple. The moment you start talking, say, we can't negotiate. Oh, well, let's negotiate. So the moment you do that, you already lost all of your moral ground. Okay. So far, we're good. Yes. The next thing that the Rebbe spoke about repeatedly that needs to be done to help Israel defend itself from the world pressure, from the pressure of America, from the pressure of our allies, quote unquote, from the pressure of our friends that are pressuring us to give away land for peace, to make all these concessions for peace, is to create facts on the ground. Irreversible facts on the ground. Sometimes, there's a very famous expression, it's better to, instead of asking and getting a no, better to say sorry after. How does it go? Better sorry than, ask for forgiveness. There, better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Sometimes, if you know the world's not going to like it, not going to give in to you, and not going to endorse you, just create realities. And once you do it, the world will come to appreciate it. Case in point. In 1963, you know what Israel did? In Dimona, they developed nuclear weapons. And America and the whole world was screaming, how could you do this? You can't have weapons. And President Johnson was upset. And at that point, it was Kennedy actually, he actually threatened an ultimatum behind the scenes against Israel. And if you read through the history of the time, it was all behind the scenes, that Israel was seriously afraid that America might send soldiers to Dimona. There was real pressure that Israel can't have nuclear weapons. And Israel said this is a non-negotiable discussion. If our enemies are going to have weapons, we cannot, the fear of a Holocaust, of being gassed to death, was too real, it was too strong in the minds of these Jews that were not living that far after the Holocaust, and there was no way that they would ever allow another nation that was an enemy of the Jews to have nuclear capacity and them not. And because of that, despite tremendous behind-the-scenes pressure that went on for a long time, and the fact that all other nations didn't allow them, Israel didn't ask for permission. They didn't even ask sorry after. They didn't ask for an apology afterwards. Israel, we still, till today, has not officially acknowledged, they don't respond if they have nuclear weapons or not. The whole world knows it. The whole world knows it. We're not part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. We're not part of the IAEA. We're not part of anybody. We're part of defending ourselves. That's what Jews need to do. When Jews said never again, at least this they understood. For other nations to have nuclear bombs and not us, that's not how you do never again. It wasn't negotiable. And so guess what? Today we have nuclear weapons and they don't. It's not for discussion. We create facts on the ground and the world accepts it and the world moves on. I'll give you another example. In 1981, Iraq was close to having their nuclear reactor in Osirak. And what did Israel do? We violated all rules and all laws, and we invaded enemy territory, and we destroyed the sovereignty of a sovereign nation by attacking their nuclear reactor without the permission, without getting permission slipped from them first, and all that. And the whole entire world condemned Israel. There was a unanimous condemnation of Israel, including from our dear allies in America and the whole world. Everyone condemned us for it. And today, they all say thank you. They say thank you. 2005, Bill Clinton was the president. He said, today the whole world recognizes it great. Kenneth, what's his name? Kenneth Edelman was then the U.S. ambassador, deputy U.S. ambassador to the United Nations at the time. And he voted to condemn Israel for having bombed a nuclear reactor. And he says, for my sins, I was at the United Nations then. And then I thought we should condemn them. Now I look back at it, one of the biggest mistakes of my career, and I regret that I ever did that. Can you imagine if Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons? Yeah. Iraq, this is 1981, a place called Osirak, right? Osirak was 1981. Iran was nothing then. Saddam Hussein was a month away, or a short period away from having a nuclear weapon. Until today, Israel doesn't allow Iran. We're not so open. We still attack things. We kill their scientists. With computer warfare and with bugs in their program, we're going and kill. Everyone knows we're killing their scientists. We know that. The world knows that. No one doesn't know that. But certain things are not negotiable. So we just create facts on the ground. And when we create the facts on the ground, those become the facts on the ground. And now we negotiate from there. It's a whole different discussion. It's a whole different discussion. And this is why the Rebbe repeatedly pushed that we need to do everything we can to populate the areas that are strategically important to Israel. By creating civilian communities, by creating settlements, by creating facts on the ground. We can't give away this land anymore because people live here. As long as we keep it empty, because we're going to one day have future and we don't know what will be. So you're allowing yourself to be pressured in future negotiations. If instead you change the fact and give the permits and allow people that are desperate for homes, and the housing crisis in Israel is a real crisis. Israel's a very, very small place and not a lot of homes there. The apartments are tiny. And if we would just give permission, allow them to build, then they want to come and say, well, this is Palestinian land, this is this land. Sorry, people are living here. End of discussion. End of discussion. Right? Doesn't happen when the Arabs ran away. It's the end of the discussion. And so this is critical for us to do, to create realities that will defend us and protect us. So I think everything says clear. Question that so many people now ask is, what should we do? What can we do about it? Right? That's the question people ask. What can we do? And that question is really a wrong question. Because the question, what should we do, is a situational question. First, we need to start asking ourselves, what should we think? How we think is not situational, it's fundamental. And when we change the way we think, we will begin to change the way we react situationally. If we start to change the way we think as Jews, we will be able to change the way we start dealing with situations differently as well. And so we have to start going to the root of the problems. We have to start going a little deeper and understanding what is the cause of the problems that we're currently facing. And we understand the root and the cause of our problems, that will help us see the world in a different way. Help us see the world in a different way. Last week we saw a video. Every Israeli leader came to the Rebbe for advice. Every one of them, from all the parties of Israel, came to the Rebbe. They were received by the Rebbe. They were impressed by his wisdom, by his strategic insight, by his military wisdom. They valued his blessings. They sat outside this door in the Hasidic synagogue in the middle of the night to have a meeting with the Rebbe. And they were impressed by the Rebbe. But guess what? They didn't listen to the Rebbe. You know why they didn't listen? Because although what the Rebbe was saying made sense situationally, they fundamentally didn't see the world the way the Rebbe did. They didn't see the identity of the Jewish people the way the Rebbe did. They didn't see our claim to Israel with the clarity that the Rebbe had. And because they didn't change the way they think, despite agreeing situationally, the facts didn't change either. I'll give you a case in point, a very powerful example. In was sent by Zalman Shazar, who was then the president of Israel, I mentioned before already, from 63 to 73. The president of Israel was very, very close to the Rebbe. 1972 was the Rebbe's 70th birthday. So the president of Israel wanted to send the personal birthday greetings to the Rebbe. The president of America at the time sent Herman Wouk, who was the American representative, to give birthday blessings to the Rebbe. And Yitzchak Rabin, who was the U.S. ambassador to Israel, who was as left and as not religious and as secular as an Israeli could be, came to 770 on behalf of the Israeli government to wish a happy birthday to the Rebbe. You watch the video, see a part of it. It's a much longer video. He describes like being in 770, like, like a fish out of water. This guy had never been in a synagogue in his life, probably. You know what I'm saying? Put him into 770, it was a culture shock. And the Rebbe, in the course of the conversation, started to give him a very lengthy religious explanation on this verse. It's a verse, I'm going to give you the context first, you'll appreciate the video afterwards, where Bilam comes to curse the Jewish people. Bilam comes to curse the Jewish people. And instead of giving curses, what happened? Blessings come out. So they were supposed to be curses, but instead they were blessings. So what's the blessing of Bilam? He says, behold, these people, the Jews, they are a nation, they are a people that dwells alone. They are not reckoned among the nations. So, because we are so consumed with this legitimacy to find favor in the eyes of the world, instead of seeing these words of Bilam as a blessing, remember, he said blessings. So instead of understanding that we're self-sufficient and we don't need to be dependent on the other nations or be reckoned among the nations because God is the one that's taking care of us, other nations need alliances to survive. Other nations need help from others to survive. We don't need anybody. We have God. And instead of seeing that as a blessing, how do some people see that? As a curse. Let's see the story firsthand.
I remember quite vividly this discussion. It started by a question that was put to me by the rabbi. Aren't you feel alone as the representative of the Jewish state among 120 countries and peoples that are represented in Washington? From this beginning, the rabbi started to deal with the question, Am levadad ishkon, what has kept the people of Israel always, little bit alone, by choice or by outside pressure or rejection? It's by the two forces. First, by our own choice, by the Jewish people's own choice, to be what they are, to stick to the Torah, to the faith, to the tradition of the Jewish people for 2,000 years, without a state. Inquisition, expulsion, pogroms, no doubt the Holocaust. And regardless to all this, the Jewish people remain faithful to the Jewish religion, to the Jewish tradition, and succeeded to survive what no people anywhere in the world proved to be successful.
Understand? He's coming, Yitzchak Rabin, and he's trying to say we should be like everybody else. We should be a member of the nations, etc. And the Rebbe says to him, you're missing the whole point. It's a blessing that we're not among the other nations. Our uniqueness is something to be cherished, to be chosen, to be proud of. Now, by the way, I have to tell you that right before he signed the Oslo Accords with Bill Clinton, he made a statement. He was very proud of himself. I think he said it by the garden. Actually, he said it right before, where he said, Israel is no longer a people that dwells alone. God said in the Bible, we're a nation that dwells alone. But thank God, we changed. Thank God we got rid of that verse. It's no longer applicable. We are no longer, it says Yitzchak Rabin with great pride, we are no longer a nation that dwells alone. And now we have to join the global journey toward peace and reconciliation and international cooperation. That's the Oslo Accords. I'll stop there. You understand? So, what do? We don't win by bad-mouthing our enemies and by saying, oh, they're the worst and all that. We win by understanding who we are. That's how you win a war. Now, there's a very lengthy letter of the Rebbe. Like a little part. I was reading the whole letter today. It's just such a beautiful letter. And we have time. I'm going to go through it, parts of it anyway. Where the Rebbe asks this question that's just as practical for us today. What is the practical thing which Jews everywhere can do to help the present situation? Something which is most regrettably ignored, in line with the playing down the obvious divine intervention in the most critical days of the war. Besides, we pretend like it's not God helping us. This is after the Yom Kippur War. It's a very long letter, like a 4-page letter. But it is that every Jew must strengthen his bond with the Torah from Sinai when God made us a chosen people. This is something of which we not need to be ashamed of. And he explains why it's not a thing of shame, it's a choice. It is this kind of life that also strengthens the self-confidence of every Jew wherever he may be, and enables him to shed any inferiority complex and the readiness to be impressed by a non-Jew or by an idea which comes from a non-Jew or actually non-Jewish ideology. It is sad indeed when instead of being a model and a living example for non-Jews to emulate, what happens instead? Some Jews fall over themselves to emulate non-Jews, rejecting the spring of living waters, the Jewish Torah and Jewish traditions. Understand? This is the first problem. We have allowed ourselves to buy into a narrative that's being created by other people. They're telling us what we can do for our security. They're telling us what we should do to defend ourselves. Not because they care about us. They care about themselves, which is fine. But we forget that. And we forget that the narrative is something which is not coming for our benefit. And we forget that it's not about us. It's about them. And we forget who we are. And so this is the first thing we need to remember, that if we are going to effectively win a war, not only a military war, militarily we talked about last week, if we're going to win a PR war, we have to start by knowing who we are and by being proud of who we are and not allowing other nations to decide for us who we are, but instead us being proud to tell the world what God decided who we are and where we live and where our home is, etc. Okay? And this, I'm not going to read the rest of the letter inside, but this is the idea of the psychology of the morale of a nation. The morale of a nation comes, you know where the morale comes from? It comes from seeing people who are not suffering from any inferiority complex. Through the end of this part of the letter, when you have no inferiority complex, that's the best way of winning or preventing wars. When I'm afraid of my own shadow, when I'm afraid to fight strong, what happens? You have wars of attrition, it goes on and on and on and on. When we go strong, we destroy them all. Okay, let's go to the next video.
Es kommt zu gehen, a Goy in Erzisot, hat gesagt, kommen dich zurück in Washington. Als gewähnt der meisten Mal in Erzisot, wird dann bewiesen Weizmanns Institut, wird dann bewiesen die Universität, wird dann bewiesen die große Hotel, und wird dann bewiesen die große Gassen, wie Chulu, ist gekommen in ganzen ohne kein Eindruck. Und das der übrige mehr eine von der Jeschwe von den Komiteeten wie jedes Archig, Deles in Kongress und im Senat und hat übergegeben seinen Eindruck. Danach ist gefahren nach zweiten Mal, hat ihn bewiesen Meir Shiori, mit dem bewiesen im Kessel Marovi, nicht im Kessel Marovi, wie ist zugeputzt. Da dem Kessel Marovi, wie sie stehen, Iden und Davnen und auch geteilt mit einer Mechize von einer Seite Frauen, von der zweiten Seite Männer. Nie die Aniem und die Bettler, was sie seinen Mewalbel zu der Tfile und betten sie doch. Danach hat man noch hereingeführt in ein Stiebel und in eine Yeshiva mit zerbrochenen Bänken und Chulu, ist gekommen zu fahren, danach in Washington gesagt, ich hat gesehen, der Holy Land. Und danach hat Messiah gewählt, man soll geben auf Phantoms.
Beautiful. So the Rebbe here is talking about Senator Stuart Symington from Missouri, who was very, very effective in helping selling phantom jets to Israel. And what impressed him? What was it he saw in Israel that said, I want to be a real friend of Israel and make sure they have the jets and the phantoms that they need to survive? Not that he saw, a beautiful museum. They took him to some beautiful meeting, and they had a whole PowerPoint presentation about Israel. He came and he saw the Kotel, and he saw the Jews praying. He saw a little shtibel. He saw that it was authentic. He saw these are Jews who are proud to be Jews. These are Jews that are living a Jewish life. That's what made him recognize, I have to help these people. The core of what we need to do is to speak with the conviction of Jewish people. And there's a beautiful article in JPost last week. I want to thank Susan for sending it to me, and Mark sent it to me, that Jews today are becoming much more biblical in Israel. Not more religious per se, not more ritualistic, but much more aware of the place in history that we have, and being able to have the morale and the strength of conviction that comes from knowing that the land we're fighting for is a biblical land given to us by God, as I said at the beginning of the class. When we have that, we're strong. We're indestructible. Hamas knew that we were very weak before October 7th because we were divided and there was politics and there was a lot of infighting in the Israeli community. And they thought that because we're divided, we'll be easy to take. And they were right, and they were also wrong. Because the way that we came together afterward, not just we have to survive, we got together. There's been an awakening of Jews that are realizing, why are we here? What are we fighting for? And we're finally at a time, after 80 years of Israel's existence, we're finally at a time where more and more of the Jews living in Israel and more of the Jews living outside Israel are supporting Israel, are recognizing Israel is ours, not just because we needed a place for Holocaust survivors to go to after the Holocaust. Not just because we're entitled to have an army in our historical homeland. The world is starting to learn, and we have an opportunity now to present a truth that has not been said. A truth of the fact that Israel is ours because God gave it to us, and we're going to fight for it because God gave it to us, and we're never going to concede 1 inch of it because God gave it to us. And as long as God gave it to us, there's no negotiations, there's no discussions, there's nothing to talk about because God gave it to us. That's how we need to present ourselves. And if we would present that way, the Hasbara machine and all the efforts and all the millions of dollars that Israel is spending on trying to send videos and productions and prove to the world that we're legally justified and we know how to respond to say that we didn't attack the hospital because of the whole discussion will be very, very different. That's our challenge, my friends. We have to start talking not like another nation that happens to be in this country, in Israel, instead of Floridians. We need to start talking like Jews that are proud to be in our homeland. If we project our identity as victims, and that's what the Israeli government is doing. We're trying to justify still our fight for our security because on October 7th, we were terrorized. How long will the world remember that? A year ago, almost, sadly, 1,200 people were innocent. 1,200 innocent people were raped and killed and tortured and taken in prison. The world doesn't remember. There's 40,000 pictures out of it. 40,000. Let's say it's 20, whatever it is. There's a lot of other cooler, newer, more gruesome pictures. Our claim to being able to defend our land can't be because the enemy did something. It's like letting them decide when we should have a ceasefire. Our claim to what we're doing in Gaza, our claim to defending our homeland, our claim to taking every inch of Israel, making it ours, is not because they're not partners in peace, and not because they started, and not because they did this or they did that. Exactly. It's who we are. It's who we are. We need to start changing the way we think about ourselves and the way we see our role in the universe. And when we are truly at peace with the fact that God shows us, and we believe it strongly enough that we're not embarrassed to say it, the world will understand. The world will understand. But I want to tell you an amazing story, a beautiful story. I've said this story before. So I've heard the story firsthand from Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau. We took a trip to Israel. I don't know if anyone was here in the room. That trip, taking a trip, God willing, in a few 2 months with a men's trip. No, he still was on that trip. The first trip. So Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, the former chief rabbi of Israel, a Holocaust survivor, the youngest kid, survived the camps. So he said an amazing story. I heard this from him directly. I heard it many times. So I wrote down, I listened to it again today just to get the details. In 1971, he got a phone call from David Ben-Gurion, who was now already retired, was living in his ranch in Sde Boker. And David Ben-Gurion was a very, very historical figure. I mean, he was into history and into Tanakh, and he studied a lot of, Tanakh. And he told Rabbi Lau, who was then the chief rabbi of Israel, that he had some questions on Tanakh that he wanted to discuss. And he had a hard time traveling. He had a sickness at the time. Could he trouble Rabbi Lau to come to his house? And he wanted to talk and learning, to talk about his questions on Tanakh. Of course, David Ben-Gurion calls you to come. So, so Rabbi Lau makes the trip, comes to his house in Sde Boker. They sit for a few hours in a very, very deep, beautiful conversation. He was a smart guy, David Ben-Gurion, and they had a deep conversation, whatever the conversation was about, whatever his questions were. When they finally finished the whole learning and discussion, Rabbi Lau says to David Ben-Gurion, he says, I want to ask you a question. We're sitting here talking, they bonded. So I've heard a story said about you many times, and I want to verify the story. I want to know if the story is true. What's the story? In 1937 was the Peel Commission. Lord Peel, probably Peel in Hebrew means an elephant, but okay. So Lord Peel, it's a great name. Lord Peel was in charge of a commission by Britain to try and figure out what to do with this ongoing problem with the Arabs and the Jews living in Israel. And they were the precursor to the UN partition plan. So they had a whole commission. And they had a bunch of delegates and witnesses from the Arab side, from the Jewish side. They came and they testified, a whole commission. And David Ben-Gurion was the very last witness to testify on behalf of the Jews. It's in 1937. So when he finally finishes, he spoke for a long time, for 2-3 hours, gave a very, very detailed, very, very beautiful, lucid explanation of the Jewish claim to Israel and our historical claim and how we've been there. For hours, he gave a beautiful presentation. Finally he finishes, and Lord Peel says to David Ben-Gurion, I have a question for you. Where were you born? So he said he was born in Plonsk. Where is Plonsk? Poland. Born in Poland. He was a Polish Jew. So Lord Peel says, isn't it interesting? You just explained that great land, how Israel is a Jewish land and a Jewish homeland. Every one of the Palestinian presenters and speakers that spoke to us today, all were born in Israel. They all have a land deed, a Kushan, showing that they were born, that they have Kushan is the Ottoman Empire, a land deed was called a Kushan. They have a Kushan, showing that they were born there and their families are there, they bought the land and they worked the land there. And all the Jewish representatives are Polish and Eastern European. How does that add up? Lord Peel asks, where's your Kushan? Where's your claim to the Holy Land? At that moment, David Ben-Gurion realized he was holding in his hand the Tanakh. When he started his testimony, he had to swear, he would speak honestly, and on the podium where he was standing, there was a Tanakh that he had used to swear in. At that moment, he grabs the Tanakh that was in front of him on the shelf, and he picks it up, and he says, this is my Kushan. This Bible that you all hold so dear, this Bible that you all look at and you study, and in the English community, the Tanakh is an important book. This book, this is my Kushan. This is my deed that says that the land of Israel belongs to us. That was the story he asked him. So he asks Ben-Gurion, so he says to Ben-Gurion, that's a true story. So he says, Emes v'yatziv, true. Exactly as you said it. It's exactly how it happened. It's exactly what happened there. It's exactly what happened over there. That's the true story. So the Rabbi Lau says that he's so smart. David Ben-Gurion said, I want to ask you another question. What's the other question he wants to ask him? One second, my video got lost for a second. He says to him, tell me, okay, whatever. He says to him, tell me, imagine you have a Kushan, you have a deed, a document, to say that this land belongs to me. And then you take your document and you scrunch it up and you throw it in the garbage. And you tear out some of the pages that you don't like anymore. And you cross out some lines. And you ignore a few pages. And now you come to the government with your sprinkled Kushan, it's not nice and clean. It's all torn and pages are missing and ripped up. Would anyone accept this as your land deed, as your document? Is that what he's asking? You say the Torah is your Kushan. You claim your whole right to the land of Israel because the Torah says that God gave it to us. And then you take the Torah and you skip pages and you tear out pages and you don't follow it. What kind of respect is that to your own land deed? That was a question Bilal asked David Ben-Gurion. And he says, when he says the story, David Ben-Gurion was so smart, he didn't even try an answer. He didn't even try an answer. Why am I saying this story? Why am I ending with this? Not that we have to all become religious and do every word of the Torah we do, but I'm saying the point is, we have to recognize that the whole world recognizes the Bible. And the whole world follows the Bible. It's our Kushan. The Bible, the whole world follows, is our document. And the moment we start to live with that, the moment that Judaism is real in our lives, it's not just something in history. The moment we recognize that this is a part of my identity, a part of my life, a part of who I am, and it's something that I connect with on a deep, visceral level, part of my identity, become biblical, then our words will resonate in the whole world. Words that come from the heart and to the heart. Our words will resonate, our words will come across, and the world will recognize and appreciate that the land of Israel was given by God. There's no negotiations. There's no way to give anything away. There's no way we can ask Israel to surrender strategic places and strategic land. It's God's land. God gave it to us. And that is a solution to how we win the PR war. To stop talking like victims, to stop talking like people that are fighting a defensive war because we were attacked and we have no choice. To stop talking like intellectuals of the universe that are entitled to land like anyone else is entitled to land. And to start talking like Jews. To start talking with the convictions and the clarity that comes from knowing that I represent God in this universe. That's the answer. Okay, my friends? Hope you enjoyed. A few important announcements. Thank you. So, a few important announcements. First of all, if you felt a little bit of an inspiration to go to Israel, I've been feeling a tremendous inspiration. So I already booked tickets. So I'm doing this trip to Israel in November. If you, for men only. Unfortunately, there'll be another community trip maybe next year. Come speak to me for more information. I'll give you the highlights and all that. Few members of the community already have tickets, and we're already excited to be going. So it's happening. We're looking forward. That's first of all. Secondly, if you enjoyed this class and everything else we're doing at Chabad, please do join our summer raffle. It's going on until Sunday. If you've already donated, which is the majority of you in the room, thank you very, very, very much. We truly, sincerely appreciate your support. And for the few that haven't, please do so. Karina, I believe, is here outside and can help you with that. And thirdly, and most importantly, this is the most important. If we learn to talk like Jews, my friend, I hope that tonight I've been able to empower you to recognize that we have to be ambassadors of truth to the world. And one of the great challenges that Jews have is that even when we feel our Judaism strongly inside, we're afraid to tell it to others. We're afraid to tell it to others. So the next JLI course coming up on November 12th, the day after I come back from Israel, is going to be Nurturing Relationships, 6 weeks on the Jewish wisdom for building deeper, richer connections in all your relationships, learning how to listen better, learning how to communicate better, learning how to criticize better. That's an important one for Jewish mothers, you know what I'm saying? Learning how to heal broken relationships, dealing with those that we've somehow not communicated that well with in the past. So it'll be taking Jewish wisdom and bringing it into our relationships. Every one of us has relationships. Every one of us can improve and enrich our relationships, again, with the wisdom of the Torah. So please do join us, but don't just join us. You can sign up now, and you can also sign up for the whole year. You can do a discount, $200 for the whole year, all 3 lessons. But if you want to be a real ambassador, if you want to truly help spread Judaism in the world, invite some of your friends to join you. Think about someone you know. Like, look at Michelle. Michelle brought a friend along. I forgot your name. I know you told me before. What? Christine. And Steve brought along Mark. Gee, Mark, I remember your name. No offense to you, Christine. But so thank you, Steve, for bringing a friend. Thank you, Michelle, for bringing a friend. This is our job. And those of you that you come along, bring your spouses. Also, thank you. Come. Don't just come to the next JLI course. Hopefully, we'll have all of you here, plus another 50 people. If everyone here, bring someone else. Have 100 people in the room. Right? We'll have 100 people, and I'll go on the stage, and I'll scream louder. Okay, my friends? Thank you very, very much. Hope you all enjoyed. I am here to discuss and take questions. I will stay on the Zoom. Last week I walked away, I got distracted, and I'm sorry about that. If anyone on Zoom wants to say anything, I'm here. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Oh, and a big thank you to Alan Elalicht for sponsoring the food. The beautiful food was sponsored by Alan Elalicht. Anyone wants to sponsor food for the next July course, come speak to me. We'll have food, and then we'll have a lot of people also.